Welcome to the Give Back Lab. I'm your host, Daniela DeGrandi. You've entered a space where bold voices, real stories, and unfiltered conversations come to life. Here in the lab, we're breaking bias, shifting thinking, and exploring the power of giving back through truth, vulnerability, and diverse perspectives. We celebrate diversity of thought and everything beautiful that makes us human. This isn't just talk, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly the kind of space we need. We're unlearning, relearning, and evolving together. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Give Back Lab. Today, I am honored to be speaking with Dr. Mitch Abrams, who is going to talk to us about the work that he's doing in compassion and mental health studies. I'm very excited for this conversation today. So welcome, Dr. Mitch Abrams.
Thank you, Daniela. Wonderful to be with you and your listeners.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and how you got into it. Give us your story. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Sure. So I would say it started around 2010. I was in my very first year of medical practice. I'm a practicing radiologist, and I found out I required open heart surgery. I had a congenital heart defect called hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, which basically means a big heart, and I had to have a surgical correction for it. So as you can imagine, doctor became patient, and I experienced our healthcare system from a very different side. And I realized that how we deliver healthcare, how we study it, how we define health and wellness was extremely limited in scope. Through this experience, I realized that, I was being prepared for the physical effects of having heart surgery. I was having conversations, and it was very much focused just on the physical body, which got surgically corrected, but there was an emotional toll that I was not anticipating. And this really catapulted me in a very different direction. I found myself on a journey exploring how other cultures approached health and wellness, and trying to identify and put my finger on the pulse as to what it was that was missing within our model. And along the way, I found myself traveling to the Far East. I was in India, and it was in India I realized that there's an entire discipline of science that we're just not exposed to in the West. There's an ancient perspective of understanding energy and how we each individually are beings of energy, how we're connected to each other and connected to something much greater than ourselves. And this was a big aha moment for me, because as a radiologist, you can imagine we don't use prescription pads or scalpel blades. We use our understanding of energy to non-invasively dissect the body like a loaf of bread using an MRI or a CAT scan. So this perspective of looking at energy from a modern point of view, but yet at the same time from their ancient perspectives, and more importantly, learning very specific techniques like mental exercises that help you connect to that energy. It's a science of the mind. And so a lot of my work now is helping people understand this interesting intersection between modern science and ancient wisdom. Science and spirituality are not two ends of the spectrum. They are literally, if you take a step back far enough, we realize that this is a circle, and that we each have this amazing inherent capability to tune in to this energy. So when it comes to mental health, when it comes to burnout, compassion fatigue, even just the sense of, the science of compassion, understanding how to self-regulate, understanding your own energy has, significant implications to physical, mental, emotional health, but also that spiritual essence, that sense of connection and feeling connected to yourself, feeling connected to others and to something greater than yourself is, a huge part of the medical model that has been kind of left behind in the biomedical context of, just looking at you as a physical being, and that we're going to just, cut something out, or we're just going to throw some pills at it. There is something fundamentally missing. And this, I believe, is where we're headed in a new era of consciousness and a new era of quantum physics as we better understand the implications as it pertains to our inner experience.
I love that. And congratulations on getting through that heart procedure. And I'm happy that you caught it and you're here with us. That's fantastic. So, well wishes for continued health. Uh, I love the connection between historical ancient practices and today, right? I think and I agree with you completely, right? There's so much in the simpleness of historical practices that sometimes with modernization we leave behind. And we see that in all aspects of life. I see that in business leadership. I see that in technology transformation. I see that in just everyday life, right? And there's that old adage of history repeats itself, right? And I love the fact that we're talking about energy and how it impacts us, right? Because I think that there's some religious aspect to it, some spiritual aspect to it. I know that in India, there's a big belief in astrology and how the universe and energetic fields, alignment of planets can affect us. And then I know that there's a religious aspect to that that says, that is not really religious. Some religions are, that's not religious. That's, praying to false gods. And you shouldn't think about that stuff, but we are energetic, right? And we are energetic beings. And I have a very good friend who's an acupuncturist, and she talks about how she started out going to be a doctor, and she had a terrible, terrible experience when she went into undergrad with one of her professors, and she pivoted to acupuncture. And she is such a proponent for Eastern medicine and how that affects our body and energy and flow. So I love to have this conversation about, and they've made movies about it, right? Eat, Pray, Love. It's I don't know if you've seen it, but with Julia Roberts, who is a very successful journalist in New York, I believe she was, who just kind of blew her life up and decided to go do a tour of the world, right? And she went to Italy to eat all the fabulous foods and learn culture and immerse herself. And she learned things about life in that. And then she went to India, where ultimately she finds herself, right? And what in the teachings and meeting with gurus and things like that. So it's a fantastic movie. But it's that kind of thing, right? And I'd love to have this conversation with you today about the compassion that we show one another in today's world of modernization. And everybody is, from children to adults, every generation, right? Even in their 70s and 80s, people are finding companionship and tackling loneliness through screens. Or trying to, which is why we have a lot of seniors getting scammed, and we have a lot of children who don't know how to socialize and interact with people. So what are you doing in your work? What are you studying, and what have you been learning as you've embarked on this journey?
Um, so there's a lot there to unpack. A lot of the work that I do is helping. So as we begin the conversation of energy, I believe that looking at the science of the heart is like foundational. It's like the first chapter in helping us reframe our understanding of who we are, not just as individuals, but as a collective, as a community. So when you look at the science of the heart, it turns out that our heart is much more than just a pump. The heart has actually a little, you can consider it like a little brain. You've heard of the gut brain, but the heart also has a little brain, and it's highly intelligent and is very much involved in translating your emotions, your inner experience into rhythms. So your heart literally encodes information and encodes the energy of your thoughts and emotions in real time. So we can now measure that. We can now begin to witness how the heart is literally changing with respect to how you feel and how you think. And we can teach people how to use this in terms of biofeedback so that they can learn to self-regulate. They can cultivate an inner state of balance. When I say balance, I'm referring literally to your nervous system, where your sympathetic and parasympathetic arms of your autonomic nervous system begin to work in beautiful balance with each other. And that's called coherence. When two independent systems, they get connected and they begin to dance in step with each other. So this can be reflected and measured through heart rate variability. So when people learn how to tune into their heart, they're now learning how to tune in to this higher level of emotional intelligence. You begin to feel in a much more expanded state. You can experience this increased sense of buffer, this inner spaciousness, so that when people come at you, they might be rude or they might trigger, but now you have an inner space where you're not going to react. You can experience that sensations and you stay grounded. And what's happening at a biochemical level is that, your stress hormones are not just reacting right away. Your body is able to non-react to external stimuli. And the more that you practice these techniques, the more coherent you become. So your baseline shifts and it just changes your personality. It changes the way that you're going to experience your external environment. Now, this is profound when it comes to mental health, how to address burnout, but it also has a direct impact to those around you. So your heart is literally radiating an electromagnetic field around the body, and the rhythms of the heart is encoding information of your emotions. So now imagine the pulsations of electromagnetic waves radiating out into the world is encoding your experiences, your emotion, and other hearts will tune into that energy, that it can pick up that information. You can pull other people into your rhythm, meaning if you've ever been at a party, or you're sitting in a meeting room and somebody walks in, you can feel their vibe. Sometimes you can feel, oh, negative Ned just showed up, or a ray of sunshine just burst through the door. And we're able now to tune in to that sense, that energy. And the science has shown that other people's heart rhythms can be found within the brain waves of another individual, but that only occurs when an individual is in a state of inner coherence, when they're in this optimal energetic physiologic state, that you're now able to pick up more information of your external environment, and you become more aware, you become more conscious, let's say. So when this happens, when there's this, connection between hearts, we have this capacity of actually synchronizing heart rhythms together. We call it co-regulation, physiologic synchrony, whatever you want to label it. What happens is that in those moments, that's when there's a deep sense of connection that occurs. So research shows that your pain threshold can increase by up to 50% when you're in that state of compassion with somebody. Compassion has been shown to reduce opioid use following surgery by up to 50%.
Wow.
And, if you're talking about organizational health and, if you're a CEO, well, it's important to know that when you have a group of people working together, the heart synchronization, when that occurs between your working group, that's been shown to have a 70% positive predictive value that they are going to come to the right solution when one given a problem. So the heart rhythms encodes information. That information and that rhythm is being sent to the brain. It helps us think. It helps us perceive information. It helps us process information. And most importantly, not just simply react. We can now learn how to respond to our environment. And at the same time, you're holding space for other people, because your coherence, your nervous system can literally support the nervous system of people around you. So now it's, compassion, it's connection, it's optimization, of working groups. And then there's a whole, the next level of connection, which I think is really fascinating. And this is the frontier of like where we're going as a species, because the 2022 Nobel Prize in physics was awarded to three gentlemen that experimentally proved that we are all part of a non-local entangled universe. We are quantumly entangled. We are all interconnected to each other. And so for decades now, academic research has identified this interesting phenomenon that when groups of people come together and they cultivate that inner sense of compassion for self, and then they direct it to a community, even if it's in another, location in the world, that community will reduce conflict. There's a reduction in crime. So social metrics improve through collective intention. And if you're still thinking about the world through an Isaac Newtonian perspective, that lens of separation, well, this would make no sense. It'd just be crazy. But now, through an understanding of quantum physics, well, actually, it makes a lot of inherent sense. And so, as we know in medicine, your thoughts and your intentions have a profound impact in your physical, your mental, your emotional well-being. But from the spiritual lens, we're now understanding how your thoughts and emotions also affect communities around the world. And we can begin to reframe this understanding of not only our individual potential, but what's our potential as a community, as a collective. And that's a lot of the work that I'm focusing on, is helping people understand this new chapter of medicine, this new common thread between self-care and global health. And I believe using art, using music, not only can we spread this message far and wide, but it becomes very infectious. This is how we can create a bit of a Renaissance approach to creating change in people's lives, for our communities, and for the world.
Yeah, I love that. And the tie to art and music, I always find very grounding, right? I am neither an artist nor a musician. I cannot sing, I cannot play an instrument, and I'm lucky if I can draw a proper stick figure. However, uh, I have found that when I'm down or I need to focus, um, or I need to balance and regulate. If I put on some music, I sing to myself. I sound like Whitney Houston. To others, it sounds like a flock of geese getting slayed. But in my head, in my regulation, music, dancing, movement, that artistic expression, I find very much balances me. Um,
Yeah,
I sometimes can connect with my inner self through lyrics or the emotion of the song and the tone. So I understand that, and I love that. I know that for neurodivergent children, for a long time, they've done music therapy and art therapy. And I know that when people suffer traumatic brain injuries, music therapy, art therapy, things like that help revive that. Why, why, what have you guys found in your studies that help to prove that, right? So we know that it works, but what kind of statistics does it move, right? Where in the studies have we actually proven scientifically? You say earlier, that it's scientifically proven that this stuff. So what are the experiments that are run? What kind of things, how are things measured? Just for an understanding for our audience.
Well, um, historically, much of the work that's been focused on that, it's been looking at psychometric analysis. So taking pre and post questionnaires and looking to see how people feel. Then we started to use functional MRI scans and looking at how the brain functions differently as a result of a particular experience in real time. Um, I can share that we're actually about to start next month a really fascinating project, a research project with a Grammy-winning musician. Her name is Natalie Bonet, and we are looking at how her performance can affect the physiology of an audience. And we're using heart rate variability, biofeedback technology. So basically, what we would call telemetry. So people are going to be connected to these devices, and in real time, they're going to see how their hearts are being affected by music. We're also
Mm.
including breath work. We're doing a number of different modalities, and we're going to watch in real time how these different external stimuli can not only affect the level of coherence or the level of changes in the physiology, but also the synchronization between audience members, and we can show that in real time. And
Right. That's
also,
interesting.
yeah,
Oh, awesome.
and we can also demonstrate the degree of synchronization that occurs between the performer and the audience.
Right.
And so and also what we're doing is we're taking that information, and that's being fed into an AI program that will then um, create art, digital art that will be fed back to the audience in real time. So it creates a deep level of immersion and biofeedback and co-creation of art in this environment.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Super, super interesting.
yeah,
I look forward to learning more about that after you conduct that.
yeah.
Um, it
Oh, I'll
it
have some cool stats once with
I
it.
would love that. I mean, I guess as an outsider looking in, I would wonder if you're completely connected to all these things, does that affect your experience? I'm sure you guys are measuring all of that. So I'm really excited to learn the stats that come out of that, because the actual environmental, emotional connection, at some point, I figure you get over the environmental and it normalizes. If everybody is connected, right? Nobody's standing out and feeling insecure. So I would assume it normalizes, but I'm excited. I'm excited to learn what comes out of that. That sounds super interesting. So you mentioned AI, and I want to talk to you a little bit about AI and how it fits into this world of compassion and mental health and physical being. Um, there's a lot of um, there's a lot of discussion right now with AI and it affecting mental health, causing people job displacement, causing issues for job creation at the entry level, right? There's a lot of college kids right now who are very worried about, I'm going to school and is AI going to take my job before I even, take over my field or take over the first, 0 to 5 years of employment in my field before I even get out of college, right? And we're talking about here in the US, we're talking about some kids incurring hundreds of thousands of dollars for an education, right? And they're worried that coming out, they're not going to have a role. So how do you see that affecting AI in itself? How is that playing into the effects of human connection and compassion?
Well, I think technology is always a double-edged sword. I think technology can um, radically improve humanity, which it has, historically. But when we are not responsible with it, I think that can also hasten our demise and work against us. And, we could sit all day and pick apart, examples. But I think what we're at this moment in time where we need to recognize that when you look at the human body, we are truly very complex, divine technologies. We are technology. I mean,
Mm.
if you think about every second right now within your body or within your listeners, bodies, there's billions of chemical reactions taking place every second in a very coordinated, very coherent fashion. Each of us are made up of trillions of cells working as an ecosystem to create a superorganism called you. Now, when we begin to reframe and step back and just realize how complex, how technologically advanced our being, our physical form is, and the interplay between how emotions, how thoughts play into the physical form, how your thoughts can change your biochemistry. Your thoughts can turn on or turn off genes, the genes that are creating the proteins that create life. So we need to embrace and begin to appreciate just how powerful the human body is. Now, once we begin to accept this framework of the human body as being divine technology, and you begin to appreciate, well, the heart, for instance, it picks up information, what we call the future. I mean, literally, the heart responds to an experience or an event before it actually happens. And the more that people are attuned to that body's sensory awareness, meaning that deeper connection between the mind and the body, the more intuitive people are. Research has shown this. So we need to understand that, one, we are divine technology, and two, that our humanness is extremely intelligent. We are, in a sense, co-creators with the universe. In a quantum reality that we are living in, we have to now accept the fact that your thoughts, your emotions, your awareness, your consciousness is a thread woven into the fabric of what we call space-time. And one could even argue that consciousness is the foundation. There was nothing before consciousness. Consciousness eventually created the physical form that we're experiencing today. From that perspective, it empowers people and empowers communities. And so when we begin to realize this connection, we now realize that the world is designed in a way that does not serve humanity. We are living in a global socioeconomic model that was designed so long ago at a time when we thought we were separate. We thought we were just separate beings. And we created a system that's very dog eat dog. And what happens? Now we're at a point where it's cutthroat. It's a you versus me situation. If I'm going to win, somebody else is going to have to lose. And, think in terms, if your body was dealing with that, if 85% of all the oxygen and nutrients going to your brain right now, if 85% of all the nutrients was allocated and reserved just for 1% of your brain cells, and the rest of your brain had to fight for the rest, what do you think's going to happen? You're toast.
Right.
So from that perspective, we have to accept that, okay, yes, it's a stressful world because we designed it at a time where we were confused. We were just not aware. We are unconscious, and that's okay. It got us to this point. But now we're at a point where we know better. And we have the technology, we have AI that would allow us to literally pivot our global trajectory. And it's not difficult. It's really not difficult for us to find ourselves on a new trajectory. It's just a matter of awareness. And then you'll see people really inspired, because once they realize what they're capable of and what people want to tune in, it's our birthright. Individually, it's our birthright to be able to tune into our hearts, to tune into this divine nature. And I believe that if you provide the resources to people so that they can nurture their own mind, their body, their spirit, that we're all designed for greatness. We can all flourish. And there's enough resources in the world for everyone to receive abundance. We're here to love. We're here to be compassionate. Just like the cells in your body functions based on these premises. So, to your question, looking at how AI is affecting the world, yeah, it's a real problem. But it's not necessarily the technology that's the problem. It's the construct in which we find ourselves in as a result of an old age, an old paradigm that, like an old shoe, it just doesn't fit humanity anymore.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's where I think we need to take the conversation and say, look, how are we going to use all of these cool technologies to not only, shift our trajectory, create abundance for all, create a healthier society from everything from local all the way to our local and global levels. And at the same time, technology can be used to help deepen our human nature, not replace it. And I think
Yeah.
that's the key.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. Even from a business perspective, when I work with clients and I'm advising CEOs who are looking to uh, adopt new technology or modernize a platform, the conversation is always about, why are you looking to do this? And what are the outcomes that you're looking to get out of it? And what needs to pivot and shift to get you there, right? Because sometimes going to AI because you think that you can reduce your workforce by half, is that the ultimate outcome you're looking for? And what data and measurements do you need to put in place so you can continue to grow? And if you reduce, what do you do with those people? Do you reallocate them and give them an opportunity for career development and maybe create a new stream of revenue? Or do you put them back into the pond, right? So they can fish for something else. But it it is a conversation that I continually have around, as we modernize, as we evolve. What are the outcomes that we're evolving to, that we want to evolve to? I think it's important to understand those. And how do we pivot along the way? Because it may be that, the shoe doesn't fit anymore. Maybe it's too stretched out. Maybe it's, too tight. Um, and the shoe analogy is great because, having had 3 children and an obsession for shoes, I can tell you that as your life shifts, right? Sometimes the shoes fit and sometimes they don't, and you have to pivot. So I love that analogy. It's a great one for women. But it 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 is really interesting. I love the compassion point in the work that you do, because I feel like we have gone through such a competitive world where you had people who are just constant competition, right? Um, being better than the Joneses, whatever the case is, but a constant competition. Or they disengage. They just disengage because they don't want the competition, because they don't want to possibly lose, so to say, right? Everything is a competition. Who has more than who? Um, there's that, and then there's the compassion of coming together and being a team, right? I'm better than you at one thing, you're better than me at another thing. Instead of us competing against each other, why don't we collaborate? That collaborative compassion. Um, I think that's where I'm trying to help and give back at the Give Back Lab, but push that thought, right? How do we come together and celebrate experts in their spaces and collaborate to a greater good, instead of this competition narrative, right? Like you say, right, if that 1% of the brain only has all the nutrients, you're toast. I agree with you,
Mm.
right? I agree with you. If we don't collaborate as a community, as even on the family level, as a family, as friends, at a community level, in the office, right? Even the state that we are in today of business, even within the office, collaboration has decreased because people are feeling like AI is going to come take my job, or, the economy is really tough. So, I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to keep doing what I do. I'm not going to call attention to myself. And I'm not really going to collaborate because I'm afraid somebody else will look better than me through material that I give them, or whatever the case is, right? So I've seen a shift in that through my coaching a lot, where that sense of camaraderie and teamwork has been lost.
Mm.
Through whatever it may be, economic times, technology, just culture, morale changes of the company. There's a lot of companies right now that I work with that are growing through mergers and acquisitions. And when you try to integrate those two things, you lose the compassion,
Mm-hmm.
right? It becomes an us versus them. It's very much like blending two families, together, right? The Brady Bunch kind of thing. The Brady Bunch effect doesn't happen very often in that pretty kind of way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you see the work you're doing evolving in that camaraderie, sharing kind of space, right? Because that goes across each sector.
Mm-hmm.
Childhood friends, families, it can be a personal thing, it can be a business thing. That camaraderie, compassion, that collaboration, how do we, and you've worked across the globe, so have you seen culturally, right? We talk about cultures and how we're different. How do we start to blend that together?
Mm.
How do we start this train going down the path?
That's a great question. Um, I think it occurs with two parallel conversations. One that we're already having around, this reframing of understanding of who we are, understanding the nervous system. If we, the better that we understand how the body works, the more that we're empowered with the ability to self-regulate and self-control. So one, giving the tools and providing, the knowledge and the tools to individuals so that they can learn how to connect with themselves. The other conversation is directly speaking to compassion. And I think it's important that we begin to break down, some of the key elements of what it means to be compassionate, not just to each other, but to ourselves, because they're not mutually exclusive. And so, as the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, based out of Stanford University, they identify 5 main buckets in order to cultivate compassion. The first bucket is becoming self-aware of suffering. So we have to become aware of suffering. So in the situation that you're just sharing, like, I think as a CEO, if you are making serious change, for instance, to your organization, you have to recognize that there's going to be suffering amongst your colleagues. And from that perspective, right, people want to be heard. People want to be seen. And when they're not heard, when they're not seen, and that kind of, it speaks volumes to the values in which an organization or leadership, conveys towards their community. So number one, we need to become aware of that suffering, that situation. The second thing is it's called embodiment. We have to experience that suffering. Okay. Now that might seem really counterintuitive, right? Because, do you really want to feel pain? Do you want to sit in that anxiety? Now, what's interesting about this perspective is that the answer is yes, we do have to, because that's how we can, work through our emotions, but we can do it in such a way where we don't react. We can do it in a way of observance. And that's where this heart coherence, these techniques of learning how to tune into the science of the heart so that you can create a balanced nervous system so that when you do, stand witness of the pain, whatever that pain point happens to be in an individual's life, they're able to sit with it and feel it in the body, allow it to flow through them. The stories and the narratives around them can now be looked at without judgment and without, labels. And in those moments, there's significant healing. That's where a lot of, let's say, stagnant energy that gets stuck in the body from old injury or trauma, whatever it happens to be, can be released. It begins to flow as you sit in awareness. And it doesn't have to be that complicated, and just in the pure essence of just being able to sit with what is most uncomfortable and accept. And that will create serious change. But then the next bucket is understanding humility. And, you know, look, everybody at some point in their life has to ask for forgiveness. In the most simple terms, whatever we're dealing with, like, it doesn't define us. Our old decisions, things that might make someone cringe. We have to realize that those decisions don't define an individual. Those are moments of time. People are doing the best that they can in that moment of level of awareness or consciousness, the stories that they've been told, the stories that they continually tell themselves. There's so many aspects, just to say that those are decisions and moments of time that don't define an individual, but it's a moment to recognize, a state of being. And now that's that opportunity to say, well, I don't want to remain in that state. I want to be better. I can be
Right.
better. I deserve to be better. So understanding humility, and to say, look, if you're worried about how other people are going to judge you, you have to realize that in any moment, for every second that somebody else is judging another, that's a second that that person is losing for the ability to connect and deal with their own journey of life. I mean,
Right.
it's judgment business. So humility. And then we get into the next bucket is common humanity. So to recognize that there's many other people who are suffering. There's many people who may be suffering with the similar, similar issues. Their stories might sound different, but there's a lot of people in the world that are also suffering. To know that you're not alone
Right.
helps people get through, difficult times. And that is also layered with what we were talking about in the initial conversation, is understanding just how interconnected we are as a global ecosystem. That's why we're designed in a way that your heart listens to my heart, why my energy can affect the way that you think, how you feel, and how you're going to act based on my, how I feel. So understanding common humanity. And then the very last bucket, which is probably the most important, because if you don't do this last step, everything that we're talking about, it really falls under empathy still. And
Mm.
empathy is important, but for someone just to be empathetic can be very harming to an individual, because now you're holding on to all of that suffering from let's say another individual or a community or a situation, and it's going to get stuck inside you unless you do something to help relieve that suffering. So that's the act of compassion. So you have to do something. Now, it can be as simple as tuning into your own heart. If you recognize a suffering, either within yourself or you recognize suffering in another, in an individual or a community, in an injustice, that pain, that suffering is going to be now within your nervous system. And if you don't acknowledge that, and if you don't perform an act of self-compassion where you can just tune into your heart, even if it's for 30 seconds, that energy gets stuck. So to be able to help relieve your own suffering is an act of self-compassion, so that you can continue to be the best version of yourself. You can continue to hold space. Your heart can hold space for others. And this is where self-care and community health, or the health of others, where it now becomes not two separate things, it becomes one single entity.
Right.
And it's through that reframe that we can then have conversations about how we best manage change within organizations. How can we best manage, some of the, issues that are happening around the world in a way that's constructive, with
Right.
potential, with meaningful outcomes.
Right. I love that, because I say all the time, it's all about being vulnerable and very real and raw with yourself in the mirror first,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of us put on masks to get through our daily lives, and you may wear a different mask at a different phase in your life, right? I'm home with my family, I'm with this mask. I'm at work, I'm with this mask. I'm commuting, I have a whole different mask, right? And so in this era of re-engaging our persona, or reinventing our persona, there's a lot of fear of judgment? How are people perceiving me, right? As an individual, what are they thinking? What vibe am I giving out? And so people, I feel that's why I think imposter syndrome is so big these days, because people walk around caring more about what other individuals think of them than they do about themselves. And I love that self-care reflective, right? Because at the end of the day, we die alone, right? Theoretically, right? So we have one life to live. I believe that, and we should do it fully and unapologetically in a good sense, right? Um, no purge here. Just be really real, vulnerable, and raw with yourself, and unapologetic about the good that you bring and how you choose to conduct your life uh, in goodness. And I think that that opens you to a level of emotional maturity that allows you to then give back to others, your family, your community, a stranger on the street, right? It doesn't, to show compassion and love towards humans and animals, right? Anything really. It doesn't require a relationship, a connection. It just requires, I think, self-awareness and self-love first.
Definitely.
Um,
Definitely.
right. And that in itself is a humility, right? You have to, and I think that coming out of that, you end up with confidence, and you end up with a character that is unconditionally loving and forgiving of others and the things that they do, because you know that they're operating within the abilities that and the parameters that they have, right? Whether it be childhood traumas or past experiences or fears. A
Definitely.
lot of people live in fear, right?
Definitely.
Of things happening, that anticipation.
Yeah.
Um, so I love that. And that I think that, to me, that I think I have a lot of compassion, um, and I have a lot of empathy. Although if you met some really good friends of mine, they say I don't come across as an empathetic person, uh, because I won't allow you to get stuck in the mud, right? I have empathy for you that you've gotten stuck there, and I have compassion for you that you've gotten stuck there. But I am more an action-driven human, so I want to help you get out of the mud. Let's get out of the mud. Let's hose you off. Let's move forward, and then we'll come back and revisit how you got stuck in the mud, why you got stuck in the mud. I don't want to ignore it. I'm not about ignoring it and letting it go away. But I also don't feel like sitting with you in the mud is going to do either one of us any good or the greater good, right? We should revisit it. That's just how I am. So I am action driven, and I am a solutionizer. So sometimes people just want to talk and I want to help them solutionize. So like you say, we take on others' problems, and pain points, and we really hold them as our own, and we show them compassion. So I really, that whole conversation really resonates with me as an individual. Um,
Just,
what?
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, what really resonated with me as you were sharing is that I think it's important to recognize that that state of vulnerability is really an it's a sign of strength. And I think in the past we used to think that, oh, they're so vulnerable is a sign of weakness. But actually, in order for us to get to a point of true self-authenticity, to
Yes.
recognize, ourselves, to see ourselves in the light as it is, takes a lot of strength and vulnerability so that we can, move past things that holds us back, in our past, can hold us, from moving forward. And I think the best way in order to, allow yourself to be free in this moment is to have that power of vulnerability, to recognize certain things and to know that you're never defined by necessarily by an action. It's defining yourself in these moments where you are wanting to be the best version of yourself, and you're
Right.
constantly trying to be as aware as possible so that you can feel situations within the body. You can begin to understand your connection to others, and there's a connection to something much greater than ourselves. I mean, if you just think about an MRI machine, I mean, I'm looking at a brain scan. We're literally extracting information from the light of your atoms. We're all beings of
Yeah.
light. We're all spiritual beings having a human experience. And so when you learn how to just tune in, you're actually tuning in to your inner light. And I say this, yes, there's a very deep spiritual, ancient perspective to what I'm sharing, but it's also a very scientific perspective. Like, there's information, you can tap into that information. We do it with technology, you can do it with consciousness. And so as we tune into that inner light, not only are you expanding yourself on every level, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, but you're also expanding your compassionate latitude, because it's through your own light that you're now going to feel the light of others, and you'll feel
Right.
them at a deeper level because you found the light within yourself. It's,
Right.
it's a very simple process. It's not necessarily easy when you're working through the shadows and working through, you know, um, you know, horrific things that may have happened in life. We don't want to belittle any of that, but to know
Right.
that there is a science of transformation that's deeply connected to wound healing, and on the other side, peak potential. Because we're all
Right.
here, we're all designed to thrive. We're all here for sacred purpose.
Uh, and I love I'm just so inspired by this conversation. I would love to understand I would love for you to be able to give the audience and myself some tips on how do we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, allow ourselves to connect with that inner light, with that inner compassion, to work through the masks and the shadows, to get to connection. Because I think that if we were to summarize all of this, it's about allowing yourself the gift of being vulnerable with yourself and being authentic, and then sharing that gift with every thing you encounter,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just as a way of living. So how do we spread that? What tools and techniques, breath work, things like that do you have where people can get started on this journey of grounding themselves so that way we as a society can start to come back together and start making a difference, right? It's obviously going to take a very long time and very baby steps, and I love all of the work that you're doing, but what kind of tools can we give the audience today that they can start to ground, and any advice that you have through your teachings and
Sure.
learnings?
So I believe, I mean, there's two ways that we can approach, healing. There's the intellectual understanding. So people can learn about the science of the heart, but without that second component, which is the experience. We have to experience knowledge, and that's where knowledge turns into wisdom. And so even if we don't even engage in the conversation around the science of the heart, I think where we need to start is beginning to feel the heart center. Because once wherever you place your awareness, your consciousness activates. Um, your consciousness is like a spotlight, and it activates. It's an energetic form, and you're activating something. So when you learn how to place awareness to your heart, you're actually activating a heart center. You're activating something within. So my suggestion is learning how to simply drop into the heart. Now, it's a very, 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 very simple technique. But in the beginning, some people might describe it difficult because the mind is trained to constantly, it's like popcorn. It's constantly popping with thoughts. And so we actually have to learn how to relax the mind. And
Right.
it's a very simple technique where we can learn to take slow, deep breaths. Okay, it doesn't have to be fancy, but when you begin to slow your breath down, you can direct your awareness to your heart center. Just simply observe it. What does it feel like in this moment? And look, there's many ways that you can approach this. When you're starting out, it's always easy to do it in a quiet space. You're sitting, you're not moving your body, you close your eyes, so you're literally taking out all of the external stimuli, so it helps your awareness become better attuned to the subtle sensations that are found within.
Right.
And you practice this. Look, and if people are interested, I I guide free heart coherent sessions every night, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So you're welcome to join a growing community of people who are tuning into their hearts because, one, they're dedicated to self-care, but we also are recognizing our common humanity through this practice. So, you know, just to say that when you start a new routine, it may be difficult, but there are resources available. I'm offering just one of many. But when you practice this technique, even if you practice 20 minutes a day, you are, number one, you're getting used to creating a routine in your life, carving out time dedicated to self-compassion, dedicated to your own self-care. And you are practicing a mental exercise, like a mental push-up, if you want to think of it. And what happens is, number one, over time, the research shows that in as little as 2 months, your amygdala can actually shrink. So the part of the brain that's involved in activating the fight or flight response of stress, survival mode, it decreases.
Mm-hmm.
So now your body's not going to just react the way it used to when there's stress coming at you. You now have that expanded state, that buffer that we talked about. This is the physiology behind it. Your amygdala is shrinking. But the other thing that happens is, because now you're learning how to use your heart, you're familiar with the technology within yourself. Now, when you're in the heat of the moment, you're about to jump on a call, or you're having a difficult conversation, or somebody just said something that's very triggering, you can now learn how to activate your heart center in the moment. Now, with your eyes open, you're engaged. I could be doing it right now and you wouldn't know, but I'm keeping myself centered. I'm keeping myself grounded and engaged with you, so that my cortisol
Right.
levels aren't, exploding in my bloodstream and I lose my mind and I'll say something that I might regret. So
Right.
by literally just simply learning how to connect to your heart, recognizing the power that you have, and taking the time to practice, really
Yeah.
devoting time. And, I've seen a huge shift over time where, especially like working in schools, kids would sit and giggle when we would, asked to practice these mental exercises. But now, as they better understand themselves and they go through and they start to understand quantum physics and realize, oh my goodness, like, this is so powerful. This is a game changer, a paradigm shift. And
Yes.
now people can take it much more serious, and they're inspired. So to your listeners out there, I beg you all, like, this is your birthright. I want you just to learn to listen to your heart. And from that space, you will see a whole world open up to you. And how your journey unfolds, it's part of your journey, but we can all get to the same end goal. We can all get to happiness. We can all get to abundance. We can all get to a vision of a brighter future. And it all starts literally with simply listening to the heart.
Right. I love that. It is so true. It starts with self-love, right? And
Definitely.
self-reflection, and that, let's normalize that. I feel like it, at one point it existed, and through time and history and life, in all parts of the world, it's shifted.
Definitely.
I've been a global executive for a long time, and I've seen all cultures shift, right? So it's not just North American, it's everything. So I want to thank you so much for this incredible conversation today. I learned so much. I loved it. I look forward to hearing about your study that you're going to do. I would love to continue this conversation with you in the future. Maybe you can come and share some more knowledge. Maybe we can do some breathing technique and centering techniques with the audience. I think that would be fantastic if you're willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Maybe we make it a very um, training kind of a session. I think that it might be good. I know that there's a lot of information out there on breathing techniques and such. And please, I invite you all to connect with Dr. Mitch Abrams, who's been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time with us today at the Give Back Lab.
Thank you
It
so
has been
much.
such an honor for me. Thank
It's
you.
been a
You're a
pleasure.
fantastic, fantastic human, and I love the work you're doing, and I celebrate you. I'm so happy that you're going to continue on this work. I'm very inspired and look forward to following your journey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today at the Give Back Lab. Stay tuned for our next episode that will likely bring you some great creative thoughts and thinking. As always, it's been my pleasure to host today's episode and look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye. Thanks for joining us today in the Give Back Lab. If today's conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you just feel seen, share it forward. That's how change begins. Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking truth, and giving back in your own way. The lab is always open.